get started today, I just want to remind you that we are having a special edition of Breakfast at Blake. June 20th, you will hear from Dr. Annie Sundberg, the new head of school, and that will be in the Minnetonka Club. So go to Northrop, go to Blake, go to Minnetonka. So the food is almost as good as Blake's. So we'll have a breakfast there in a month. Well, today we have the pleasure of hearing from documentary film director and producer Annie Sundberg. According to her senior yearbook, when Annie graduated from Blake in the class of 1986, her classmates named her the most talented member of her class. Well, from Blake, she went on to Dartmouth College, from Dartmouth to New York City, and she now lives there with her husband, Rob Nathan, and a 10-month-old daughter, Abigail. So she has a lot of energy and talent as well. Annie's classmates knew talent when they saw it, the recipient of dozens of awards. I started listing them and then I said, I can't even do it. This will take hours. Literally dozens of awards. Annie's documentaries have explored a broad range of subjects, from the brotherhood within professional baseball to criminal injustice in the American South, to the horrors of mass genocide in Darfur, to stand-up comedy and celebrity culture, all focused on unforgettable people and their powerful personal journeys. To celebrate the 40th anniversary of Title IX, ESPN is sponsoring a 9-part series focused on captivating stories of women's sports told through the lens of female filmmakers, including Annie. Her project, Let Them Wear Towels, will air this summer on ESPN TV. Keep your eyes open for it on July 16th. So here to talk to us about Stranger Than Fiction in the world of documentary filmmaking is Blake's own Annie Sundberg.
So, Adam, is audio okay? Working for you? First of all, it is such a special privilege to be able to speak this morning. It means so much to be back at Blake. And in particular, I wanted to thank Becky Ankeny and Sarah Ostman and Woody and Adam for their help in making this happen. And it's incredible to see so many great faces, people who I went to school with, people who I consider family, and thank you for coming this morning. I'm also having fond memories because when I think about this particular chapel, in 8th grade, maybe this is like my early inspiration for getting involved in film, Beth Hodder, now Whitcomb, and I were part of a small group that performed scenes from Bugsy Malone. I don't know if anyone caught that. So I was also inspired because Robert Keith, who spoke here in February, I don't know if anyone heard his talk. I actually met Robert through my husband. I didn't realize that Robert was in fact related to Blake. I didn't realize at the time that he was a graduate. He's much younger than I am. And that he was cousins with Dee Jackson, who some of us went to school with. And Robert said something which I loved in his talk. He really focused his breakfast on the aha moment when he realized how he could actually do his life's work. And I thought I would riff on that, and my aha moment is how I was able to do my life's work and pay the bills at the same time. Documentary filmmaking, for some of those who are here who actually practice the art, is not known as a very lucrative art. If you really want to make money, make commercials, go to Hollywood. But if you really want a rich and rewarding life that feels like endless grad school opportunities, documentary is the field. And I'm really, really fortunate in that I have a partner in crime, Ricky Stern, and her cousin, Greg, is here today, which I thought was another wonderful small world. And our evolution, I was an English and history major at Dartmouth, and our evolution as filmmakers, we really came from a place of always loving character. I loved character in novels, I loved character in fiction film, and when we started out looking for stories to tell, it always began first with the person. And one of the things that in our journey to where we are now, we started out very simply by making films in our spare time. And I think a lot of people who don't have the resources sort of start that way. And then you can focus full time I met Ricky working on a feature after college graduation. I was the assistant to the director, and I really thought I was heading in a fiction path. And Ricky had just made her first documentary, and she convinced me otherwise. And so when we landed both back in New York City, we started on what became a 14-year odyssey. It's our first film together called The Trials of Daryl Hunt. And that was a very challenging journalistic project. It was about wrongful incarceration and a horrible, horrible black on white crime in the American South, and it looked at what could go wrong in the criminal justice system in America. And then we moved on from that to a very light topic of genocide in Darfur. And that also came to us, again, it was by character. We had an introduction to a woman who really wanted help making a film about her own work. And again, this is sort of the chance to recognize certain opportunities. She wanted us to help us do a film about how she was helping post-genocide survivors, women in particular, build businesses in Rwanda. And we sort of chewed on that, and we're trying to think, who's the audience? These feel-good documentaries often, you know, they feel good while you're making them, but they don't feel so good when nobody actually sees them at the end of the day. And so as we got to know this woman, she was telling us about her brother who was in the African Union, and he had recently left with a bunch of photographs that he was taking public about what he saw happening in Darfur because he was frustrated at the inaction by the global community. And we said, that's our story. And so a chance meeting for coffee to advise someone on a project led to the first film that really kind of put us on the map and gave us some traction. And then we shifted gears entirely, and for those of you who saw Joan Rivers, A Piece of Work, that actually came in part through Ricky's mother's connection with Joan. And Ricky came into the office one day and she said, what do you think about a film about Joan Rivers? And I thought, huh. And it was again one of those things where it wasn't an obvious hit, because everyone we talked to, we tried to find funding for it. They basically said to us, she's overexposed. We know everything there is to know about Joan Rivers. We see her, you know, she's on every talk show. Don't think so. She's also a little bit old. We're not so interested. So we basically made that film on our own. And it was an interesting process because Ricky in particular is someone who, if someone says no, that makes her want to say yes all the more strongly, which is a very good energy to have, in particular when you're making documentary films. So it was interesting because our company kind of evolved. I, along the way, had worked in television, I had worked in fiction film, and we were sort of doing these films on the side. And at a certain point, after Devil Came on Horseback, we really had critical mass where people were starting to come to us with film ideas. And we created an office, and now we actually have several employees. And my aha moment came when, this is about 5, 6 years ago, I was sitting at a restaurant with my now husband, and we're still early days of dating. We were talking about work, and I was very excited because we were just getting going on Joan Rivers, and he looked at me, he said, do you really believe you can make a living making documentary films? And that was the first time someone had actually really asked me that. And I realized that I wasn't, because I was always scrambling. I was always working at New York Times Television while making another film or doing X, Y, and Z. So that then became my year of saying yes. We said yes to everything. So people who called us up for projects, we produced the GLAAD Media Awards. Human Rights Campaign called us and said, do you want to do these short pro bono, no budget projects for marriage equality campaigns? And I said, sure. And all of a sudden we were shooting with people like Julianne Moore, and it sort of grew from there, and all of a sudden the web of connections grew stronger. And I had just filmed a human rights campaign spot with Anna Wintour, who is the editor-in-chief of Vogue, and she's actually now just got a big promotion in Condé Nast. And the day after we shot her marriage equality spot, we got a call at the office saying, Anna would like to talk with you about possibly producing a series for Vogue. So the year saying yes became a really great journey, because these projects weren't paying us tremendously, and we were working really hard. But now we actually have a fundamental business strategy where we have some television projects in the work that allow us to do the one-off films that we love. And I don't want to jinx anything, but it looks like the Vogue project, which was initially done for web only, is about to sign on to a cable deal, and it'll be on television in January. So, and it's going to be, it's sort of like a real life project, Runway. They sponsor every year an annual design competition for your emerging American designers. There's a lot of heart to it and a lot of talent, and Anna actually can be pretty funny. So there's some element to it that's fresh. But what I wanted to show today is that we have two projects. I'm going to show clips for you. These were projects that we did not generate, that actually came to us. One is a recent film called Knuckleball, which some of you may have seen. It's definitely a case of timing is everything. How I wish we could have released this film when R.A. Dickey was on his ride to capturing the Cy Young Award last year. Instead, he's had a lousy start to the season with the Toronto Blue Jays. But this film came out last fall, and this was a project that was brought to us, and it was a particular challenge because it was an essay film, which we don't often do. And it was about the knuckleball pitch, which, if anybody doesn't know what it is, it's a funny pitch in baseball that has very little spin. So when it's released from the pitcher's hand, it sort of floats, and then at the very last minute, it does this crazy dance, and it often confounds batters. And when we first got this idea, we thought, a film about the knuckleball. How are we going to do this? So. The DVD player's warming up.
Game one of the postseason without talking to Padres. So I went in and immediately started hearing, get out of here, get out of here. I was cursed at.
This is actually. I might actually just jump into this because some people have seen Knuckleball. Please forgive me. Let's see if I can go back. Actually, I will. This is the trailer. So this film came out last fall and is now in DVD.
Velocity, power. The knuckleball doesn't fit in today's society.
To the masses, it's a circus pitch. Well, learn what's up back, Sandlot Fields, and I'm more bored.
He told me he wanted to grow up and be a baseball player. He married me.
Tricky Dick. Everybody loves a good comeback story, and R.A. Dickey's is best in baseball right now.
When I started embracing my own personality with the pitch, things started really to take off.
Everything you're taught as a catcher goes out the window. As the ball gets away, at the last second, his ball can change direction.
It looks spooky.
You can humiliate the best hitters, the biggest, strongest guys.
Swing and a miss. Derek Jeter strikes out.
I think he knows where it's going.
It is erratic. When it's not done well, it's really bad.
All your dreams are all gone. So what you worked your whole life for?
Nobody trusts the knuckleball. Nobody.
You're not a little wild by yourself, that's for sure.
Knuckleballers have always been very rare. They're considered freaks, kind of fraudulent.
There was definitely some hard times. He had to sleep in the car he was renting.
You just don't ever know if you're ever going to make it back. There's a real unique bond that we share.
Learn how to accept losses without being defeated.
I think every little kid should learn to throw a knuckleball, you know?
Never lose your confidence out there.
Once it leaves your hand, it's up to the world what it's going to do.
Travel across the U.S. for baseball season, and that was a really fun film to make. But the challenge for us with this film was how to take an essay, which is basically a pitch and make it something where there was an emotional narrative. And we had 3 characters. We had the pitch itself, what is the knuckleball? We had Tim Wakefield, who was soon to exit the stage as a Red Sox player, beloved Red Sox, and R.A. Dickey, who was ascendant. And then you had this sort of chorus of older knuckleballers who kind of gave their wisdom and guidance along the way. And what we really tried to capture with that film was the sense of generosity, which is so rare in professional athletics. It's a really amazing brotherhood. And we premiered the film at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York in an outdoor screening event. It was like 3,500 people came to basically what felt like a drive-in movie theater. It was amazing. We had a pitching clinic with the pitchers and kids. And the thing that made me happiest after this was we got a bunch of emails sent to our office, and one was from a guy who said, "You just made my night because my girlfriend now wants to see a baseball game." And and that was when I realized it worked. Whatever this thing was that we were trying to do, it's a film that we hoped would, it's that tricky thing. You're trying to satisfy people who love baseball, who know the history of it, with the people who really don't know baseball, who might hopefully fall in love with it. And so now we're at a place where, we kind of got these sports calls, and ESPN called us about the 9 for 9 project. And again, it's tricky sometimes when you have multiple characters. I really strongly believe that we as human beings love narrative. It goes back to, you go back to all sorts of storytelling tradition and Greek mythologies. We love knowing what's going to happen with 1 or 2 particular people. We get invested in them and we care. When you start having a chorus, you have a really hard time finding those emotional moments. So we were handed an assignment to do a film about the first women journalists and who broke into locker rooms, women who were covering the major beats, NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, and hockey to a degree. And we just worked really hard to try to find the most meaningful stories with these women so that their experiences would connect. I'm about to show a quick clip from this forthcoming project, and originally the title was The Clubhouse. And Ricky and I actually had a big disagreement over this because we were assigned this project by ESPN, and they sort of liked The Clubhouse, and I thought there was something very elegant about it. It seemed very, it implies a world of exclusivity, and Ricky said, yeah, but it's boring. No one's going to know what it means. It's too baseball, it's too this, it's too that. So the title, Let Them Wear Towels, comes from a suit that was brought on behalf of a journalist named Melissa Ludke, who was banned by the Major League Baseball Commissioner Bowie Kuhn during the 1977 World Series. The players had voted to allow her into the locker room for the LA Dodgers and the Yankees, and at the last minute, Bowie Kuhn removed her credentials and said, "You're not going in." So Sports Illustrated filed a successful suit that the Supreme Court granted her access, at the time only to the Yankees locker room, but that really ushered in a change in gender dynamics in reporting of sports. But this is a quick clip from Claire Smith and the 9 for 9 project.
You can't write the game story, game 1 of the postseason without talking to Padres. So I went in and immediately started hearing, "Get out of here, get out of here." I was cursed at, pushed out, literally pushed me from behind the clubhouse. As I was going out, Dick Williams was coming in. I explained to him what happened, and I said, "They tell me I'm not allowed in there." And he just roughly said, "That's right." As soon as I was pushed into the hallway, I got very, very upset. Standing out there in the dark, just wondering, how am I going to cover this game? I don't have any quotes. And the media relations guy came out and said, "What do you need?" I said, "Well, I need quotes from so." "Well, they're not available." I said, "Well, how am I supposed to write this story? I'll give you more and more upset." Henry Hackett of the New York Post came by, and he's running to get in the clubhouse. And he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "I need quotes." And he said, "Who do you need?" I said, "Well, tell Steve." Steve was surrounded by the media. Henry reached in and whispered to him what had happened. And in a few minutes, Steve Garvey comes out. As soon as I saw him, I started crying. I had known Steve since I was a kid. I was Dodger. He was Dodger.
There was some responsibility on my part to communicate with her because she was a conduit to the fans and to the baseball world. I knew that I was responsible to make sure that she had access. But of 25 guys, there were probably 23 that believed that she didn't belong or any female.
He said, I'm going to stay here as long as you need me. You get yourself together, but you have to stop crying. You have a job to do. I'll stay here first thing this evening. And he did. And I was able to do my job that day.
Us, it was, whoops, sorry. I think it's stopped. I think for us, the biggest challenge with that is sort of trying to find the emotional moments where you connect with what these women went through. And we also had no footage because these women were working in an era where they had a notepad. No one was carrying around a camera. So we also were trying to figure out how do we illustrate this. So we just did crazy reenactments. And we hired a bunch of young people. That's why working in New York is very good because a lot of young, hungry actors are excited to do anything for a good meal and $100. And we, so that film, it was an interesting project to piece together. And it's actually starting to move Ricky and I more in hybrid directions, where we're starting to do some semi-scripted projects, and we're actually doing more commercial work now. But for us, it's always been a love of story and a love of character. And hopefully, we've just started on a new project out of Chicago. And in an ideal world, our company, we sort of live in this strange world where we're almost a commercial production company, where we can take on certain projects and we can keep certain people employed, and the revenue from that allows us to do our passion projects. And we've just started a new passion project. So, and it's a project that we'll be shooting in Chicago over the next year, and it's very much a meditation on the nature of family. It's about a young rapper who has kind of lived in the shadows. He writes for people like Kanye West and for Queen Latifah, and he's actually won Grammys, but he lives very close to the bone. And he recently discovered that his father, who'd abandoned their family, has been living homeless on the streets of Chicago for the past 20 years. So he has been working to get his dad back into a sort of normalized life, and at the same time kind of rebuilding his own family. So it's very much a story about the dance between family responsibilities and creative dreams, and what's particularly happening in the south side of Chicago on a larger sense. So hopefully that'll be done shooting at the end of the year. But I'm going to open it up for questions because that may, I have other clips that I can show, but.
How do these films work? Do you get involved with films that start out following someone and then goes through a very long period of time? I think of Food Trees as being a good example of that. And then the Queen of Versailles, where it started with one objective and then things shifted in the middle of it, but she was following us for a couple years.
Yep.
Do you get involved in long-term films like that, and how do you figure out what's going to happen if they go this direction or that direction?
We're having that debate right now. It's interesting because I know both of those filmmakers, and Hoop Dreams was very much like our project in terms of length, not in terms of accolades. The Trials of Daryl Hunt was a 14-year project, soup to nuts, because we thought the legal cases were going to resolve much earlier than they did. And I think Steve and Peter, who made Hoop Dreams, really didn't think they were going to be on that ride as long as they were. At a certain point, you just have to say, what's the value of the story? And Ricky and I, have been looking at end games. The idea of you enter a film thinking it's going to be one thing and it becomes something else, that happens all the time in documentary, which is why there's a richness to this type of filmmaking that is so rewarding. It's very unexpected, and you also it makes you almost more creative in terms of where you want to take the story. These projects were assigned to us, so they sort of had fixed narratives, and they were both done within a matter of months. Knuckleball took a year. Let the Mortals took about 8 months. the project that we're on right now, Ricky really wanted to shoot just for a particular 3-month window. You know, let's get this guy's dad off the street, let's get him through some transition housing, and let's, you know, sort of see where that lands. I said, no, that's not enough of the story arc. We need to see, will this young musician actually become a father? Because he's talking about actually having his own child with his wife. We want to see, will his father relapse? Will his father actually get a job and be able to hold on to it? So now we're talking about shooting more like a year, year and a half. We also didn't expect what's currently happening, which is his dad is doing remarkably well. We kept thinking there's going to be some challenge, there's going to be some huge, you know, relapse or, you know, battle with alcoholism, and so far it's been remarkably struggle-free. And so we're sticking with the story knowing that at some point something will break. So yeah, you're often, you know, it was interesting because with Joan, with the Joan Rivers story, that was a different decision as well because the original goal with that was Joan had a plan to bring a play of hers that she was workshopping in London to Broadway. And the idea is let's film over the course of the year it takes Joan to bring that to fruition. After the play was panned in London, she decided not to bring it to New York. And so all of a sudden we were thinking, so our storyline all of a sudden diverged. And then was it just a year in the life? And then how do you leave it off with a woman who's a perennial, you know, performer? And that's sort of what we did. You just get a sense that she will keep going until she's the last woman standing. But yeah, they always evolve, these films. They often evolve, I should say. Yeah.
When they're evolving, do you find yourself fighting the desire to want to shape how it's going to end?
It's hard because with documentary filmmaking, there's an anxiety, there's an element of anxiety because you're always trying to capture everything, or there's that feeling that you need to be on top of everything. And we, you know, Ricky had the analogy of, it's like if your baby takes his or her first steps and you're not there to see it, they never happened. You just sort of have to put them out of mind because otherwise you're going to kill yourself, you know, emotionally with all the things that you missed. And the idea of trying to put a shape on it, what helps with that, managing that anxiety, is to really look at a film or a story with a set of themes. So in particular with Joan, we had several themes, and if something wasn't relevant to that theme, it really didn't bother us if we were capturing it. We didn't need to shape her in any way or manipulate events, but we were looking for things that echoed those themes. In the same way right now with this young musician, there's tremendous chaos in his life, but we're really looking to focus on the things that will help us deepen the themes of the film about family. So. Often, there's a lot of time before the cameras even roll where we spend getting to know our subjects. So we spend a lot of time on the telephone if we're in long distance. Sometimes we spend time in person. So, and this also comes from when we started shooting in film. I mean, sort of belies how old I am, but we started on 16 millimeter, and you can't just keep rolling like you can now in video. And so, you kind of get a pretty clear sense, I shouldn't say kind of, you get a clear sense of themes just in conversations and understanding what that person is really about, what they're passionate about, what their main challenges are going to be. I think right now our debate on this Che story is how much of Chicago to weave in. You know, how relevant is Chicago to this particular story? Is it a universal story? Is there something about this community in the south side of Chicago that makes it unique? So that's kind of an internal debate we're having right now. So, you know, it's an interesting thing because sometimes you try shooting it and you lose it in the edit room. You know, sometimes you cover your bases while you're in the process of shooting the film and you ultimately throw it away. But, and you start to find the rhythm. We often start editing our films before we're done shooting so that if we know we need something or we're looking for sort of cinematic transitions or we need another interview from someone to flesh something out, it gives us that leeway. But yeah, if we're really strongly considering a theme that's developing that we don't know where it's going to go, we'll probably shoot some scenes that are backup and then just have them to work around in the edit room.
Can you talk a little bit about how once you've decided on the theme, how do you get the film to your target audience?
That's the tricky thing. And originally when I was thinking about this talk, I was thinking I was going to talk about how the changing landscape for distribution is making it almost easier in some ways to make films and get them seen. My husband Rob always has a theory that make something good and it will find an audience. It may not find a huge audience, but it will find its audience. And what I lament is that I fear film critics, in particular, you know, Pauline Kael and the late Roger Ebert, they really helped films find their right audiences. And I think in the decline of print journalism in particular, we're losing those cultural critics. And so advertising is now still becoming critical, and advertising across mediums is becoming critical. What we found with Knuckleball, which was a really interesting lesson, we did not have the commercial success we expected, in part because of timing, I believe, and lack of ad support. We thought we were going to do something a little bit more renegade. We went with a new digital distribution company. We were going to have a limited release in key markets. And generally the process with us with making films is if we make a film on spec and we haven't been hired to do it, we try to premiere at a premiere festival, like a Sundance or a Toronto, and we sell the rights either right before the festival, and we use that as a launching pad, or we sell the rights at the festival. Joan Rivers, we sold at Sundance. Devil Came on Horseback, we started selling it at Sundance and closed the deal shortly thereafter. And Knuckleball was basically pre-sold. We went into to Tribeca knowing how the rollout was going to happen. But what was tricky with that is that we kept thinking we had Major League Baseball as a partner. They said that they were going to give us X, Y, and Z, and we were thrilled. But some of the channels don't move as fast as digital. So you can have a film that's available on iTunes, on Amazon, on VOD, and yet there are certain things called holdbacks still, and there are release windows. So even though our film was ready to go in April, we couldn't get sales slots online for another 3 to 4 months, and all of a sudden we're in postseason. And everybody in postseason wants to watch the playoffs. They don't want to watch a documentary. They might want to watch it at the beginning of the season, or they might want to watch it when someone's getting a Cy Young. We just had a weird missed timing on that one. And MLB, unfortunately, when basically the league owns the World Series, and so that's where their energies are when that happens. And so we lost marketing support as well with the timing on that. And so then we waited. We said, do we wait? Do we just hold and not release the film at all until the spring? And RA was so hot last fall. R.A. Dickey won the Cy Young Award last fall. That was a big raging debate with us because our investors wanted to get their money back. MLB was sort of cagey about what they could and couldn't offer. So yeah, it's tricky. Every film has its own thing. And I still believe, though, that we find our films through advertising. We find it because we hear about it, on the radio, on the television. We see an ad in the paper. More and more things are starting to emerge virally through the internet, but my mom, who is wonderful, is not going to find a movie through the internet. She is in her 80s, and she will find a film because the New Yorker wrote a nice review about it, or because she saw an ad in the paper. So.
Do you always finish pilots that you start, or have you gotten something and decided it's not going to work?
We have definitely started things that we haven't started. They tend to be more ideas that we've wanted to pitch to television. We have started, there's one film that we started that unfortunately the subject died, and so that sort of is sitting on ice right now. We're not sure if we're going to be able to complete that project. I actually believe that if it's a decent story, stay with it, because I think a lot of people lose, I think film, it's the Vince Lombardi quote, it's basically, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's sort of like you have to have the will. Successful people are made up of having the will to do it. And I honestly believe that there's a certain momentum that actually when you complete a film and you see it through, that in and of itself gets it out the door. I don't believe in wasting money, however. That's the sort of the thing. Often we'll do like a 2-day shoot, and we'll do like a test shoot, and we'll shop it around. We'll just take it to people, seeing if there's a response. We cut a little trailer together, and yeah. But we haven't totally abandoned something once we're 2 feet in.
The Devil Came on Horseback, kind of a two-parter. How do you try to avoid getting emotionally involved, and if you do, how do you come out of that? And the second part is, do you follow up when you get emotionally involved in something such as this, and go back and get touched?
actually, I mean, that's the one thing is it's sort of like when you become a documentary filmmaker, you have to, one, like people because you end up having a very large extended family for the rest of your life because you become very close with your subjects. We're still very close with Gretchen and Brian. Gretchen also has a daughter about my daughter's age, so we're trading baby pictures often. Brian, it was a tricky film because that was, in many ways, we had started getting involved with social issues when we made The Trials of Daryl Hunt. And this was right when there was a different expectation for documentarians, not to just make a film and get it distributed, but to do what's called audience engagement. So it's not enough to make the film, you have to have social impact. And you have to quantify that now for your grants and things that you know, the monies that you use to make the film you have to report on that. Devil Came on Horseback was emotionally exhausting because it was our first true outreach campaign. A lot of the money that we raised to make that film came with strings attached, and we spent a year and a half after the release of that film working basically on cause-related activities, working with Brian and working with groups like Saved Our Four and doing talks at Council on Foreign Relations. It was very, very rewarding, but it took us out of filmmaking for a year. And after making that film, that's when Ricky and I really had a hard time. We looked at each other and we said, we just want to make a film that people want to see on a Friday night. We just want to make something where, you know, we can all enjoy it. And it was a really exhausting year after Devil. So, but yeah, so that's the emotional engagement. I mean, I think the harder thing is, there's a beautiful film out right now. Tim Hetherington was killed in Misrata in the spring of 2011. He's an amazing photographer who actually shot some of the work on Devil Came on Horseback. And we became close colleagues at the time. And he became very, very close with Sebastian Junger, who wrote A Perfect Storm, who wrote Into the Wild. And they made a film that was Oscar nominated called Restrepo, which is just fantastic. They embedded themselves in the Korangal Valley in Afghanistan, and it was just remarkable. I don't know how Sebastian made the film he just made. I saw it, and I talked to Sebastian afterwards. It's called Which Way is the Front Line from Here? And it's about Tim. It's a memorial to Tim and his work, and it is beautiful. It was just on HBO. I highly encourage people who haven't seen it to see it. That film was a very hard emotional film to make. So, over here, and then in the back.
You just briefly talk about the process for the relationship you have with your investors, how you raise money, and of course seed money.
A quick thumbnail on this. It's interesting. Our two most financially successful films to date are The Devil Came on Horseback and Joan Rivers' A Piece of Work. And they both work because they were of kind of zeitgeist topics. Joan's celebrity allowed that film to pop. Joan is also a tireless promoter and was very willing to do press. That's very key. Tim Wakefield, not so willing to do press. R.A. Dickey, very willing to do press, but in the chase for Cy Young. Joan, we as a company ended up financing most of that film, so we didn't really have investors. So that was interesting for us because we took a lot of risks on that film. We could have lost everything. And we were able to basically retain, you know, the revenue and share it with only a handful of people who had deferments, you know, some of the post houses we worked with and other people. Devil Came on Horseback was another structure for docs that's actually very, very highly recommended, especially if you have a film that's of a social issue or that has science implications where you can apply for public money. We set up a deal where half of the money was funded by grants and half the money was with investors. And the investors remarkably, in the recoupment strategy, the way these, you know, partnerships work, often the investors had every right to claim that they had put up the liquid capital to finance 100% of the film because the grant money didn't have to be recouped. They actually looked at that grant money as side-by-side investment. So what that allowed us to do was to fund an outreach campaign so that when the revenue came back in, they treated the grant money, which technically did not need to be recouped, as investment into the film, and that went to our nonprofit partner. So that actually worked on that level. And then the investors, I'm still sending checks to the investors, which is kind of great. I mean, the film has been airing internationally on television, and our DVD sales are still going. So the investors probably made, you know, 50% back on their investment on that. Knuckleball will be interesting to see because we're just starting to get our DVD numbers, and we'll probably recoup on Knuckleball, but we're not going to make a lot of money. And that was the film that everyone, the investors, were like, oh, we've got Major League Baseball, we've got, you know, potential Cy Young candidate, and we've got, you know, a beloved Red Sox, and we look at how these Red Sox highlight reels, I mean, you talk to the video companies, a highlight reel of the best of the Red Sox games from a particular season, that is their cash cow. Like, it was unbelievable. We looked at the revenue reports, and that's why we said, okay, let's make a crazy film about the knuckleball. Our investors, they will probably just have a straight recoupment on this film. So, but yeah, we generally set up general partnerships. So, yeah, there was one in the back. Hi. That's a tough one because there are two places I was going to go with that. The first thing I was going to say, if anyone who's actually thinking about film, the one thing I would encourage you to do is develop a trade. Either learn how to shoot a camera or learn how to edit, and you will always be employable, even while you try to do your own personal projects. I often find that those are the people who get paid when we never get paid. So that is one way to actually earn a living while you're trying to make your passions. The other is find a tribe. I've been really amazed at what's happening, in particular in cities like Los Angeles and New York, where I'm really seeing collectives emerge. Like, there's a great group called Creative Cow, where people basically were looking for help and resources, and they've turned it into an incredible dialogue. It's all online. I was looking for a graphics designer for a nonprofit project, and I tapped into Creative Cow, and I have 3 amazing young graphic designers who are making their own films but earning a little freelance cash on the side. People share tips about how to do things. People barter with each other that way. And I think that that tribe happens in the world of cooking. I see it with my friends who are chefs. I see it, in the arts in particular. I just think that if the idea of also being open to something on a journey, I hate to say it that you'll know it when you find it, but it's that thing that just you never let go of. Like, I remember having that feeling when I was in 8th grade that I wanted to make a movie at some point in my life. Don't ignore those feelings. It's like that's what will take you in the right direction.
Annie, as you look to the future of your next projects, if you got to choose the next documentary, whatever you wanted to shoot on, what would the topic be?
Oh, God. I don't know, because I'm actually really torn. I'm really interested in fiction work right now. I think part of it is having a child and wanting to have a little bit of control over a film as opposed to being controlled by the film and chasing someone else's life for a while. It's really hard. I think the things that I find scary, and my immediate gut reaction is to want to go to films that are hard-hitting investigative journalism that scare you a bit into action on some level, and yet those films don't get watched. And the big question that I always say is this a better article or is this a film? Right now, my head is sort of deep in this Chicago story, so I don't know that I have another thing that I'm looking at right now.
We won't force anything. So, Annie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.